Oh, baby. Talking goats. Talking goats.
Talking goats.
Talking about some goats. What is up, everybody? Welcome to the DNVR show. There it is, man. An extra long air horn for you on this Thursday. As we keep rolling along, guess what we have? Vote.
What's that?
7 more days of off season.
Oh, baby. Oh, baby. We are almost there.
Then a new season changes.
Which season is that?
Preseason.
The preseason.
Yeah, not quite the on-season.
Is there
the
another season between preseason
no,
and the season? Okay.
There's preseason.
All right, so we're one season away from the season.
We're one season away from the season. That's so true.
We're getting close.
We're in the winter. We're about to turn to fall here in just 7 days. We are booked, by the way. We are going to San Diego. We're going to be giving you live coverage out from our Airbnb in La Jolla. So we will be there covering all things Denver Nuggets this year. Should be a good one. I'm looking forward to it. Today's show, never get tired. Every year, we get to update our hot box and hot takes.
That's it.
There's really, remember we talk about the goalpost move? We're kind of at the last movement.
How far can they go?
They can't go past GOAT, and we're going to talk about Jokic. Does he have, what would it take for him to enter the GOAT conversation? What would it take? He's not there yet. We're not trying to say he has the case just yet.
We don't think he's the GOAT.
We don't think he's the GOAT quite yet. Yeah, well, he might be the GOAT, but it hasn't been revealed to us fully, definitively.
Yeah.
So what would it take? Narrative standpoint, statistical, benchmarks, highlights, rings, all those things. We're going to break it down. We also, you want to talk about Jordan Poole and Michael Porter?
A little bit, yeah. I think there's an interesting juxtaposition there. Nice little clip today. Hopefully some of you saw it at home.
I can't wait for it. We also have some beef around the NBA, so we're going to look at that beef. To help me do it, the man whose mustache is the most controversial this side of Hitler. It's Brendan Vogt.
Oh, tough. I'm a little too German for that one. Mustaches get mixed results. And the one thing I know about having a mustache is you can't wear one and expect no one to comment on it. So it's all fair game.
Yeah.
You know, you do it to yourself. I'm comfortable in my own skin, though, Adam. That's a lie.
I was going to say, come on, dude.
Lie, dude.
Come on, man.
I'm anxious right now.
Yeah, you see, even just saying you're comfortable in your own skin was a little uncomfortable. Let's get right into some beef, though. The GOAT debate, we're going to do that in segments 2 and 3. Okay. We're going to talk Jokic GOAT for about half the show, starting in the next period. But we've got beef in the NBA. We've got beef. It's going to start here. Austin Rivers. First of all, I got to say, man, a lot of player podcasts out there right now. Very few that I actually enjoy. Austin Rivers, again, I don't listen to it, but I do see the clips that come through. We know this from his time here. He can be a very thoughtful and insightful quote.
Yeah.
But he can also be a provocative quote.
Not afraid to stir the pot.
Not afraid to say the thing he actually thinks. It's refreshing. It's what makes his show very good. I think he is going to have a career in media should he want it after his career. Like, he's one of the guys that I think naturally could segue it and be interesting, and he's already wading into those waters. But here's what he says about the Charlotte Hornets. They need to surround LaMelo around effing people that can help him tap into his potential, not deplete it. There's still teams that do it right. I don't see this problem in OKC. That shit don't fly there. That's what he says. Now, this was in a general conversation about LaMelo Ball and like what can the Hornets do to kind of become a better team. And he is basically saying Charlotte, not a winning org, not putting players and pieces around him that are going to highlight his thing. I feel like this is fair, if not a little hot. LaMelo's only been in the league 2 years. He was hurt for half the year. Like, it's a little hot, but at the same time, I think most people would be like, yeah, Charlotte has not been a good organization.
I think he's right, man. I think he's dead right. Social media manager Nick in the office has some Charlotte ties. Big fan of the Hornets.
Huge fan.
He's the one I found in my life. And he loves LaMelo Ball, talks about how talented he is. And that, one thing I try to articulate to him is I think most people's hesitation is the situation that he's in. Yeah. In Charlotte, in terms of not just what's allowed off the court, but even what's encouraged on the court. And, not just the players around him, what they're doing, but even what LaMelo Ball's green light is. So I'm like, I love LaMelo, takes some terrible shots. And you do think, is that just because he's in Charlotte and no one really cares what happens week to week? It's hard not to feel that way. So there are more, I think, talented players, like potential face of a team around the league than ever before. But it's an interesting sort of different perspective of, are there enough organizations that can house those talents, develop them, and we don't want to see stars force their way out of situations, right? But the other side of the sword of the Anthony Davis situation, for example, is that did New Orleans do a good job? Do they look like a stable organization?
The issue with that is that like the Lakers and Knicks have been the most dysfunctional organizations. Yeah, everyone wants to go there. So you are right about this, that there is this big picture thing, which is a player being stuck in an org that's wasting their potential is bad. It's just like the solution is never coherent.
Right. Yeah, and I don't like going to the Lakers either, but there's an interesting, part of it is that the Charlottes and the New Orleans of the league have to hold up their end of the bargain. And so far with LaMelo, I mean, that culture is a joke, right? We can say that. They're not a winning organization.
Yeah. But then Miles Bridges responds, Charlotte Hornets player. Had a murky little last year, actually, Miles Bridges. He says, y'all hoopers get on these podcasts and talk like y'all really like that. Speaking on other teams like y'all know what's going on, and most of the people talking the most shit don't play at all. We gonna see all that this year on me. He's talking about Austin Rivers saying he doesn't play very much, right? Yeah. Like this or that. All right, time out. Here's one thing I want to say. This idea that a player doing media can only talk about people of his status or below or something, like he can't talk about players or teams or this or that is absolutely insane. And it honestly just demonstrates to me a little bit how weird the media marketplace is right now, that Austin Rivers isn't trying to speak reverently about the players or about the Charlotte Hornets. He's trying to give his honest assessment, and he's not saying he's better than LaMelo Ball or Miles Bridges or any of the
guys on the Hornets.
He's literally just giving a take. So for me on this one, we've got beef. I firmly side with Austin Rivers on this one, and I look at Miles Bridges and I go, what is he complaining about?
Yeah, me too, man. And first of all, I think if that's the case, if you feel like the player is beneath you, then don't take a shot. Just go out there and play better basketball, right? But so A, I think Austin Rivers is right. B, I think if we follow the logic of what you just described to its end, its extreme end, who's left to talk about players? Only LeBron?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, he's the only one that can talk about all players. Everyone else has to, there's some player they can't talk about.
So what a lot of players don't like is being criticized. And you know what, man? I don't like being criticized either. Like it. So that part of it I get. But when it's sort of manipulated into an actual opinion on who should be allowed to talk hoops, I think it's always actually disingenuous. I think it's from a place of hurt and not even really actual opinion.
Right.
So, but look, here's the deal. First of all, Miles Bridges not doing the organization any favors in terms of how we look at the culture himself personally. So clean up your own side of the street, and Charlotte is, look, this is the NBA. Right? This isn't, can you be a very good basketball player? This is the most competitive league in the world. And when an organization is an eyesore on the league like this, I think it's fair to call it out.
I like that players can now speak directly to the fan bases, like that they can kind of, in some ways, replace media in certain capacities. But what's interesting to me is Miles Bridges is actually complaining about this very thing. This is the whole, if you actually sit and think about the logical of a lot of these complaints, it's, we can do media, us as players, we can do it. We don't need media. We can tell our own stories. We can make our own debates, this or that. Then when one happens, his argument here is, you shouldn't be talking about other teams. Pick a lane, man.
Yeah.
One of the two. I love that Austin Rivers shares insights that nobody else, myself included, could not share about what it's like to be an NBA player. So that not every player can do this. He can do it, and he does a good job. Miles Bridges complaining about that very thing to me is like, hey, man, why don't you just criticize? If you want to fire back, this is what creates rivalry. This is what creates this or that. But telling a guy he has no right to talk about another team, sorry, man, it's literally his job now in the capacity that he's paid to do a podcast.
Austin Rivers has seen a lot, man. Son of a coach. He's been a high school blue chipper, a guy who talked about how he got to the NBA, didn't understand what he needed to do there, and had to look in the mirror eventually. He's been he's played with superstars. He's played with bad teams. So this is a guy who's seen it all. And I mean, of course he's allowed to comment on what he's seeing. But I do think we'll see more of this, right? As new media and players doing their own media continues to grow, any podcast or any clip that's not just a puff piece, like you're going to see players turn on each other a little bit too, you know?
And they should. And this is why I like Draymond. I really enjoyed the early days of his pod because it felt like he was going to be honest. And then fast forward 7 months and he's having Trae Young on and being like...
Or like all the smoke who are just, maybe more afraid of the smoke than any podcast host in the industry. And they have the Morris brothers on. And, it's clear what their opinion of the situation was, but they did not challenge any of those answers, even as they're sitting there trying to toe the line between, well, he didn't hit me that hard and it almost ended my career. There's BS flying left and right, and they're sitting there going, yeah, that's a good point. Because they don't want to criticize
It's funny, man, because I'm telling you, so much of this is about guys really want to control the narrative, and they don't want their image ever to take a hit. I think everybody has to take themselves a little less seriously, and that's easy for me to say. For these athletes, they just feel like millions of dollars are at stake for every narrative that gains traction, and in a lot of times that is true. The media can determine who the MVP is, for example, or change momentum. And sometimes there's money attached to those various things. So I understand it. But at the same time, the sensitivity towards every little thing is like, are we not allowed to discuss? This is what people like about sports. They like to argue it and like create these debates. Just debate them. So we side with Austin Rivers on this one. Another beef. Shannon Sharpe versus Giannis Antetokounmpo. Shannon Sharpe says, and by the way, Shannon Sharpe is a debater. He comes up with takes, and he's very good at it. He says, you keep talking about, you being Giannis, you keep talking about surrounding you with talent. There's 2 spots being occupied by your brothers. Very elite take, I got to say, because one, actually false. He only has 1 brother now on the roster, but in the past he's had multiple brothers. So it's kind of a fun take, even though this one is so marginal, but it is interesting. Where do you side? Does he have a take here?
It's a bit like the Gil Arenas discussion yesterday. The first layer of this for me is the take was delivered so well that I kind of am inclined to agree with it. I'm of 2 minds about this particular line. I think it is in fact true that his brothers get those 2 spots, and are they particularly good? No. I also think there are some roster slots that can be for guys who don't play.
Can they be for a person's brother though?
I mean, they can be, but maybe he does lose some of his right to. I also am not sure if Giannis is saying that Milwaukee has failed to do that, or if he's just holding them to that standard going forward. We need to continue to do that, because when he first challenged them in this way, they went out and traded 5 firsts for Drew Holiday, and then they won a title. So that organization has responded to his call in the past, and maybe he's just continuing to apply that same pressure. I don't know if he's implying that they have failed him to date, but I do think Shannon makes a good point here. I really do. That favor's been done. Those guys have gotten their contracts. This is Giannis's prerogative if that's what he wants to do, but there is a little bit of a have your cake and eat it too thing.
So here's the thing. There's 15 roster spots. 5 are starters. You probably want to have another 5 that you feel could play every game of the season. Just because there's an injury out, you don't want to feel like one of these guys. So you have 10 spots on your roster that you hope are for guys that you could trust to play on any given night. The last 5 spots, you're probably going to have a locker room veteran or 2. Sometimes you need 2. Depending on what stage you are in your development, you might have to have 2 guys that are like, hey, DeAndre and Ish Smith made a real impact on the team last year because they have all these different roles that only a veteran could fulfill. Now you're down to 3 spots. You're probably going to have 1 or 2 prospects, maybe 3 prospects, depending on how it is, because you just need to keep the pipeline of young, cheap, role-playing talent there. I think the Nuggets ran into this in previous seasons when they had a bowl and they had like all these guys at the end of the bench that were these lottery tickets where it was like, do you have too many? Is it possible that you've used up too many of your resources in one box? And the brother thing, if they're not going to actually play impactful minutes, the brother thing, like 1, probably your limit. 2, we're starting to get to the point where it's like, man, now it's hard to have proper depth, proper vets, and proper youth all in there. So I would go ahead and say misdemeanor offense, because I think it's really, really small.
Yeah.
But I do think that it is a little bit legitimate that, hey, it is hard to build a roster when you forfeit 2 spots.
I do think Giannis is hitting the limit of whatever the old brand is, and there's a transit. He's going to have to pick a lane eventually, I think. Yeah. You can tell there's a bit of him that kind of does, I think, want to do the big market, big star, big face of the league, every commercial thing. And then there's a part of him who wants to kind of, this blue collar, it's all about the work thing. And I don't want to come down too hard on Giannis, who is actually awesome and already gotten it done and won a title. But there's just a little bit of a who is he going to be going forward?
Who does he remind you of?
LeBron. And
I disagree.
Oh.
There is a little LeBronness to his corniness and trying to craft a narrative. Yeah. But I think he might be a little more Kevin Durant.
Ah, okay.
So Kevin Durant had the backpack, riding his bike to work, blue collar, just a kid in the neighborhood, high-fiving all the children as he goes to... And then obviously left for Golden State. And I think he didn't change into what he is now until halfway through his time in Golden State, right? It really wasn't even until after the title. And I think Giannis is maybe a little bit in this too, to where in his mind, he is one thing, but he's kind of becoming something else, and he doesn't know. I think LeBron always wanted to be this thing.
Yeah.
I think Giannis is becoming that thing and is kind of like, oh, man.
Right. Some of it's happening to him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do think there's a little... Is he the, kind of sheepish, new to America, new to the league guy, or is he like a real star? And I do think in his late stage, he reminds me of LeBron in that he embraces the spotlight more than was we originally thought. It's not a perfect comparison, but I'm fat. Kevin Durant's a good one in that his perception of who he was as fans and media changed drastically throughout his career. And I just wonder if Giannis is due for we adjust how we understand him. It seems like we're approaching that threshold with him.
The last beef we have here today, Patrick Beverley on the Los Angeles Clippers. Why every time they show the team, they show the Clippers? Every app I've seen it on, they showed Kawhi and PG. That's effed up. They ain't load managing. They just been hurt. On the Clippers being the face of load management. His beef is with the NBA media, using them as the face of load management. We, just a week ago, called the load management rule the Clippers rule.
I know, and a lot of Clippers media have pointed out how, if you really look at how the rule works, it's not something that's going to affect the Clippers based off the history of how they've rested these guys. Sometimes these sort of from a distance narratives are very kind of easy to fall into place, and then we all kind of take them and run with them. I do think there's a little both with Kawhi. I mean, Kawhi is both someone who is dealing with serious injury issues as his career winds down, and someone whose approach to dealing with it was a pretty aggressive load management schedule. The other thing with Kawhi is that it's attached to some of the other things you hear, that he's, the kind of being separate from the rest of the team. Yeah. The organization caters to him. He gets to do whatever he wants. So there's an air of taking the regular season seriously that the Clippers refuse to do, that I think is what everyone holds against them. I think the actual point of the distinction between injuries and load management is maybe there's some meat on the bone there.
Yeah. The one thing I'll say is I think you got this right. He comes from the Clippers. He knows, man.
Right.
So I do feel like there's a little polishing this one. Also, Pat Bev, he's below, to me, Austin Rivers in the player doing podcast ranking, because I think Pat Beverley can be very funny and interesting and at times very honest. But I think he's a little more, well, not a little more. I think he's a lot more crafted in who he defends and who he attacks than, say, Austin Rivers.
And
I feel
political,
like
maybe, yeah.
And political. I just feel like I'm getting the real from Austin Rivers often, because he kind of just sprays everywhere. He'll say this or that. But also, it doesn't feel personal to me. Like, he's not saying things that are personal. Whereas I do feel like with Pat Beverley on this one. So I'm going to go ahead and say Pat Bev loses this beef. I side with, look, man, the Clippers have to actually show up and play. And in any other era, a team like them gets assembled, gets anointed the champions before they ever play a game, and then have never come close to actually winning a championship, would actually be on the pressure cooker even more so than the Clippers get. So to me, that's part of the game, man. The Clippers deserve to be sort of held to a high standard.
People are tired of them. And, a lot of media picked them to be something year after year, like you were saying. And there's the disappointment factor, too, of I'm just done with these guys until they show something differently. So I think that's fair. My favorite Pat Bev podcast moment, I don't know if you saw that dumb clip of Gary Vee talking about how anyone wearing a Nuggets jersey outside of Denver is insecure. And they cut to Pat Bev, and he has the most obvious, what the look are you talking about look on his face I've ever seen. So
Gary Vee, hilarious, by the way. That clip, we never talked about it, but that clip, I guess that's beef. Gary Vee has bandwagon Nuggets fans. He hates it. He hates it. Everywhere you turn, there's Nuggets, everything.
You can tell he thinks it's such a bar, such a good line. Yeah. He repeats it twice. And it's not drop the mic silence. It's no one agrees with you silence. But
totally.
Anyway, shout out Gary Vee. What a cool guy.
The spirit of the point is right. He picked the single worst team to make that about. The worst example ever.
I think if you're walking around with a Nuggets jersey,
too popular, man.
You know ball. That's actually what it means.
Nuggets just too popular worldwide, man.
You just
Sick of it.
Can't stop the train, bro.
Sick of it, man.
Can't stop the train. Hop on.
All right, let's take a break. On the other side, somebody in the chat hopped in to say you guys have to be making clickbait. Hell no, I'm not. Hell no, I'm not. Jokic has an open GOAT potential. It is possible for him to become the GOAT. We'll talk about how he would have what it would take. He's far from it. He's not there.
We're not saying he's there.
He's not saying he's there, but
hey, we've always been ahead of the curve on the Jokic takes. What's the limit? Let's find out together.
Oh, that's so true. Another doubter? Another doubter, dude?
That's always worked out, historically speaking, with the Jokic thing. Fubo TV, 140 live channels of sports, shows, movies, and news. Stream live TV from any device. Watch the most Colorado sports for the lowest price. Start watching them immediately as well with a free trial. No contract, no cable, no hassle. Just sign up and start watching. What should you watch? College football, folks. Catch the fever, Bus Fever, Pac-12, University of Colorado. Catch them on Fubo as well as the NFL. Some tennis, all the good sports. Watch all your favorite college football and NFL with Fubo. Go to www.fubotv.com/DNVR. That's www.fubotv.com/DNVR to sign up for 15% off your first month of Fubo Pro. Also want to talk to you about Nutrafol. Men, as you get older, you might notice that hair thinning, and you do not have to choose between hair growth and your health. Nutrafol provides a whole body health approach for men that promotes healthier hair, no drugs, no compromises. A lot of products where the end result sounds great. I'm wary of what I'm putting in my body, mostly because I don't understand anything. Nutrafol, it seems real simple. No drugs involved here. It's the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, clinically shown to improve hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Take the first step today. Head over to Nutrafol.com/men and enter promo code DNVR. That's Nutrafol.com/men, promo code DNVR.
And we are back for an exciting segment here. Nikola Jokic, what would it take for him to make the GOAT debate, enter the GOAT debate? And the reason I started thinking about this vote, I was listening to Ben Taylor's Thinking Basketball, and he was doing, I think there's a myth of GOAT. I actually think the idea of best player, I have mine, it's Michael Jordan. But I don't think it's definitive. Sure. I actually think the question is more fun than it is logical.
Yeah.
It's just for fun to do. There's lots of players, and he went through and just made a case for 15, 20 different players. Could they be the GOAT? LeBron, Kareem, Magic, Larry, Akeem, Tim Duncan. He goes through the list. And then he even had a couple others like Nate Thurman, who I like, where it was like, guys nobody talks about, but hey, let's look at the circumstances. What did they do, and how did they get underrated perhaps in history? And I thought it was a really, really cool discussion. And as he went through, players like Kevin Garnett, there's two guys arguing, Ben Taylor and his co-host, I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but Kevin Garnett made one of theirs, but not the other. David Robinson, both just barely missed the cut of what it would take, but at least goes to show, this is the broad, what would it take to enter the conversation for this person could be the GOAT. Now, they were liberal. They actually, if you asked them who they thought, there was only 3 or 4 guys that they think actually have a case. Michael, LeBron, Kareem mainly. But the question for this one is, what would it take for Jokic to enter that conversation? One thing I want to say here about if we project the end of Jokic's career, let's just say 2030 is the end because I think it makes a nice round number. I think that one thing that would have to happen for this, because Jokic is not that popular, even if he wins all these games, will he match the popularity of Jordan? Probably not. That was the most famous person alive for 10 years.
Yeah.
LeBron, probably not. I think, though, at some point, we're going to start separating eras. In the same way that we subconsciously separate Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain from Michael Jordan, we go those are different. I do think that one of the things that has to happen for LeBron, or for Jokic, I think 2020 has to become a new era to where people think about LeBron, MJ, Kareem, all as GOATs, and Wilt as their respective, Wilt or Russell as in their respective eras. And then it gets separated. And then you just kind of put, those guys are all the GOAT. But you can't compare that far apart.
I would agree with that. And what's interesting is, can he make it definitive in an era and not maybe the most fascinating example of a lack of a definitive answer with LeBron versus Steph? When do those eras start and end? How much of it was Bron versus Steph? How much of it is Steph was on some of the greatest teams ever assembled. LeBron wasn't. Did LeBron do that to himself? It gets difficult. Jokic, in theory, could end up in that kind of conversation with Giannis, I think.
Yeah.
A lot of Giannis's accomplishments happened enough, long ago enough that maybe just this decade, Jokic can go forward and own. But I think he has to make it definitive and go and take some of it away from Giannis, who can make a case for it, at least narratively, to enter the, if you're telling the story of the NBA, Giannis's resume is you can't omit it, right?
Right.
So that's one thing I'm keyed in on.
So I'm going to go some narrative check marks. These are just narrative things that I think you probably have to clear to even enter the conversation. I think he would probably need 4 championship rings as a minimum.
Sure.
I don't know if he had 3. Say the Nuggets win 3. I think it's really hard to make a case over guys like Jordan. Even just getting into the narrative portion of it, it would be too hard. Even if you can give all the, there's legitimate excuses or this or that. At the end of the day, you kind of need to win rings, and I think 4 is the minimum amount that you can make a case.
Yeah, I think that's true, especially because I think you have to leapfrog some of what you touched on earlier, which is just the general, Q score in the public, right? Like Jokic will never get over culturally the way those guys did, so that he almost has to make up some ground, right? So it has to be at least 4. One thing that I do think could work in his favor if he starts stacking them up. They're not all created equally. Everyone gives LeBron all the credit in the world for Cleveland finally getting there, making that comeback. The Denver Nuggets were destined to never win a championship before Jokic showed up.
Right.
Now, we know that part of the story better than the general public. I think
it counts, though.
It should, man.
It counts.
Dirk's one title earned him so much reverence. Now, he doesn't enter the GOAT conversation, but if Jokic, stacks up 3 or 4 in Denver, do you start looking at it as, one of the greater career accomplishments in basketball history? And that would, in theory, springboard Denver into the upper echelons of orgs in the league. And, that's something that LeBron has done, Steph has done.
But LeBron's only done it once.
I agree with that. But just not just taking a team and a roster, but taking an organization
and making them different. So LeBron, you mentioned, has only done it once. Now, people don't remember this, but Chicago, big market, big city, but not thought of that way.
Right.
Like the Chicago Bulls were not destined to be the greatest team of a decade. Jordan elevated them to that. So he gets the credit there. Tim Duncan, San Antonio, elevates them to that. Had good teams, but I'm just saying the Spurs, were not a powerhouse that was getting all these players. So I do think that is a big piece of this, is that it's specifically in Denver. And if you compare Kobe getting 5 in LA versus Jokic getting 4 in Denver, you could at least look at that and say, man, if you just told me, if I could tell you, like, I just blessed you with the greatest basketball talent in the world, and you get to pick what team you go to, but you have to win 4 championships. You wouldn't pick Denver.
Yeah. Nope.
You'd be like, I have to, or else what? Or else you die. Well, like, okay, I'm going to the Lakers because it's almost certainly going to be easier there.
For example, LeBron probably could have done it.
Yeah.
Hard pass.
Yeah.
Hard pass. So, yeah, I honestly think that has to matter.
Yeah.
I already think it matters for the one. To me, having been on the ground level for this and watching it, there are so many individuals that deserve credit outside of Jokic, but it is still the case that Jokic is the essential factor in that championship.
I think he probably needs 4 MVPs, just because I do think the MVP part of this matters. Like, he has a great chance this year. First of all, how many years do you think he has MVP potential in him? How many would you guess going forward?
I think he has another 4 or 5 years.
4 or 5 years of MVP potential. So in theory, he could win 7 MVPs. Is like the most MVPs he could win if he won every year, because he'd have to keep winning championships. If they won the title and he wins MVP this year, is it more likely that he would win the MVP the following year? Like,
I'm not sure. No, because there is a voter fatigue that has nothing to do with what happened last year.
This is what I'm asking. Say they win 3 in a row. So they win this year and then 2 more, and he wins 2 MVPs the next year. So he has 4 MVPs,
sure.
But they've won 3 in a row. Is there voter fatigue at that point, or is it like, hey man, they just won 3 straight, maybe they'll win 4?
I think at that point even Jordan LeBron hit that wall too of they just
a second wall.
Yeah, last year's was different. It was a different kind of presentation of the thing. No, but also was it voter fatigue or was it a weird
cultural thing?
Yeah, which we all know what we're talking about. And I think going forward it might be more of the traditional, like, because you also have to start topping yourself.
Right.
That's what happened to Giannis and LeBron and Jordan. Is is this even the best we've seen of you in the last 5 years?
Right.
So it gets weird like that. But
I think he can win, though. 4 MVPs to me seems extremely possible. I'm not saying it will happen. I bet you the line. What would you think the Vegas line would be on Jokic MVPs for the rest of his career from here on out?
2.5.
You think the line would be 2.5?
1.5, maybe. Yeah. Or the line's probably 1.5.
Man. What do you think, Kale? I just think an MVP's hard.
Yeah, that's hard. I'd probably set the line at 0.5.
Well, hang on.
0.5, and then the odd, it'd be like minus money. It'd be like minus 140 or something.
He's getting one more. We know how this works.
Really?
He's owed one for last year. We know it. If he's even close to the conversation,
I don't know, man.
I think he gets a bump this year.
I think 1.5 has positive money. It's probably plus 180.
1.5. 2.5's too high.
2.5's way too high.
Way too high.
1.5 though. So you think if he gets 2 more MVPs to me, 4 MVPs, like that's a lot, man. It's LeBron. That's you're only shy of MJ and Kareem.
And as and I mean this respectfully, like my father and the old heads will tell you, there were years where they should have won more. We will all have this Embiid year too, where like, hey man, it really should have been 3 in a row.
Yeah.
By the way, that is the big. For Jokic, the big picture is the team winning a title. Didn't give a shit about 3 in a row. I get it. You and I care about this stuff. 3 MVPs in a row, which he actually did enough to earn, although shout out Embiid. That is a narrative thing that would have been so hard to take away from him.
Right.
Because, and I don't want to, we're going to stick with the broader conversation, but Jokic at that point would have had a very good case for, okay, maybe GOAT is tough, but best peak? I mean, he's in that conversation.
Right.
So that's why that one was frustrating. But I think he gets one this year.
All right, we got to roll through these. Another narrative one. I don't think he can have a bad playoff loss.
I agree with that.
You can have playoff losses. Jordan lost, LeBron lost, these different things. Now, LeBron has the weird one in that he lost to the 2011 Mavs, and it was, yes, Dirk was playing out of his mind, but really it was LeBron played well, or played poorly in a series they lost in which they were favored. I don't think those two things can happen and you have a GOAT case. LeBron, it happened early enough in his career, he hadn't won yet, and it can fit a narrative of like he had to go, and I actually think this is true, he had to kind of hit rock bottom before he could like fully unlock everything. I think that part is true.
And his rock bottom was losing in the finals,
in the
way,
finals
like
on a big stage, and it was like JJ Barea and Deshaun Stevenson that like shut him down. So there was, to me, he can survive that. But I don't think you can have that many, man. Like, Jordan didn't have bad playoff losses. Even early in his career, great performances. I think you could make the case right now that Jokic doesn't have a single bad playoff loss. The only one would be the Blazers. But even in that one, the team recused themselves he recused himself very well, even though the team came up a little bit short. And he was so young. It was a young team. But losing to the Suns when they were injured, not embarrassing. He had a 30-20-10 game in that one. That was last year. 2 years ago. Losing to the Warriors, same thing. They go on to win the title. I don't think he has a bad playoff loss, but if he got upset in the playoffs that we don't foresee, where they were like decently favored, that doesn't happen. The margins get so thin at the top.
Yeah, man, and that's why that was the unspoken thing, because we were far away from this conversation, even a hot box and hot take. The unspoken feeling to game 3 against Utah.
Yeah.
Is this going to be it?
Yeah.
Is this going to be the one stain that we can't look past?
Right. That would have been, by the way.
It sure would have been. Shout out Mike Conley missing that shot. Also, we know Jokic redeemed himself in that series. Ultimately, the last laugh, the game winner over Gobert. But that's what was so scary about that moment, and why it's the ultimate sliding doors moment, because that would have been the one that people never let him live down. These past two, as you mentioned, A, the circumstances explainable, and then B, immediately patched up by 16-4. The next time everyone was healthy, they did it.
Yep. He has to be the definitive best player of the 2020 to 2028. I think you could say right now in 2023, he has a very strong case, maybe the strongest case of any player, to so far be the best player of the 2020s.
Don't think it's even close.
Well, Giannis also has a title.
Yeah.
Also, so I think you can make a case that Giannis and Jokic are at least neck and neck for best player of the 2020s. But for going forward, for the rest of this peak of his, I just don't think you can have Magic and Larry are the only two, but they get a little discounted because of them being together. Like, if it was Magic definitively above Larry, he might be considered closer to Jordan, but instead they're both pitted in the same tier below. I think it has to be the same for Jokic. He can't have, even LeBron, Steph Curry ate a lot on his watch.
Right, that's right.
I think that Jokic needs to own this decade, and nobody eats consistently while he's here.
Right, we talked about that before, and you're right to check me on the resumes will look similar with Giannis. In my opinion, last 3 years who's been the best player in the world, cut and dry, but I am biased. So you're right about that. I agree that he needs to separate. I also think he's going to.
Yeah. Well, if you win.
No, but I also think there was they don't actually directly line up. I think Giannis had a sort of 4 to 5 year window right before Jokic came on the scene that was his.
Right.
But I do think from here going forward, my prediction is that Jokic separates from Giannis within this decade.
Why am I depressing? Grace J says Adam is so depressing. I don't get what was depressing about that.
We're literally debating if he could be the best player of all time.
Man,
Set your
sorry to be depressing.
Higher.
And then I think he needs more big time playoff moments. And this is the true of any GOAT. It's not always just the accolades. It's the moments. Are there moments there? LeBron, the block. You know, we could think about some of the big time performance. Game 6 against the Celtics. You know, there's all these moments. Game 6 and 7 in the finals coming back. We could think of all these big time moments. Jordan even more so. I feel like we could have these big time moments. Jokic is probably one of these moments. Sometimes are about like the stakes, and with Jokic, the stakes are always smaller because he's not as popular as these guys. Right. They're not actually smaller in terms of basketball. They're just smaller in people's minds. Like they weren't hyped up the way they should have been. Nonetheless, I do think he has quite a few big moments and big statistical. I mean, he has 3 30-20-10 games. He has one of them in the finals, the only one in the finals. He's got the game 1 versus the Lakers. He's got the shots on AD. He's got the game 7 versus Rudy. Sweeping the Lakers itself is a moment that you could just say, like, yeah, he swept LeBron. Like, that's a big narrative thing. You've got 65 out of 68 minutes. There's some big moments here, but I would say he's probably 25% the way to maybe less, maybe 20% through the GOAT resume. Statistically, I think he has a lot of games that statistically are incredible, but moments, I still feel like he needs a lot of moments. He needs a lot of game winners or dominant games like game 1.
With enough runway, I think it's inevitable. Jokic produces moments on the biggest stage. That we knew well before we knew the rest of it about him, right? So as long as they're in the playoffs, that will happen. That's why the Lakers matchup was so delicious, not just the personal beef from the Denver side of things, but also no one was missing that. It was LeBron, and it was on the heels of beating a KD team. And yes, the actual story of it, if we're talking, in this conversation, those guys were a little older, post some injuries, not at their peaks, but that stuff kind of gets muddied as time goes on. And the sentence is still true that Jokic has some playoff series wins over LeBron James, over Kevin Durant, guys that are also in the GOAT discussion.
Do you think he's 20, 25, 30% the way there?
Yeah, I do.
What percentage?
I'll probably go with 30. And
so you think he needs to triple the number of big time moments, series runs?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think it's
GOAT's hard, man.
Yeah, no, but I think it's about maintaining course. There's a little bit of, sometimes we're so anxious about our guy or your guy that you kind of forget. They get up to 27, 28. Oh my God, are they ever going to get it done?
Right.
That's actually when it starts. Yeah. That's not like they're not behind schedule.
Right.
If you've entered this conversation at this age, you just got to maintain course. I do think he needs more moments, but I honestly think the moments are inevitable if his career is long enough and the Nuggets are good enough.
Right. Do you think he needs to have a season better than the one he just had? Do you think he needs to have a playoff run better than the one he just had?
I think he needs to have one more season of the caliber of the last 3 that's attached to a title run.
Just one? Think about LeBron. Here's why. Think about LeBron here. Some people say statistically his peak was 2009. Like in the playoffs, he was unbelievable, this or that. Then you think 2013 was probably his most efficient year. Then 2016, I think he was his most complete player.
Sure.
You could do this for Jordan. In 88, he wins all 3 awards, right? Scoring title, Defensive Player of the Year, and MVP.
Yeah.
Then in 91 or 93, maybe he was at the peak of everything. 96, he was wiser and older and even dominant in a different way. There's different iterations of it.
Part of what I'm saying is I'm not sure how much better a season can be than the last 3 seasons Jokic put together. And one of the reasons why it won't be talked as the best peak of all time, A, that MVP being stolen from him, but B, 2 of those years actually reaching the finals was borderline futile. Right. And so those were 2 years that could have been Jordan LeBron years, best player in the regular season, capped with a great run, but he missed out on those. So he needs 1 to 2 more of this elite wow, that's one of the best regular seasons I've ever seen, and it ended in a ring.
Right.
I do think after that, it's okay if his numbers are impressive, but not as good as this 3-4 year window, because I don't know, man. Who has a run as good as this 3 to 4 window? At some point, you can't get much better.
I think Jokic's best regular season was last year, 2022, and his best playoffs was 2023.
Right.
So at this moment, I feel like you could call 2 different years peaks, but you could even call 2021
right.
also in the running.
But 1 to 2 more years of these things lining up, these
Okay.
outcomes lining up.
And then the last one I have here for GOAT, does he need to have an impactful legacy on the sport? And the question here is, Kareem and Tim Duncan get knocked a little bit for not having a cultural impact the way Jordan and LeBron have?
Yeah, I think so.
So do you think that it's almost impossible from a narrative standpoint? Because we know, I don't think Yoke's going to have a cultural impact in that way.
I think this is the biggest barrier. And I mean, obviously between him having to go and win 3 more MVPs and 3 more titles, pretty insane ifs, you know? But even if he does that,
or more,
even if
actually.
he does all that stuff, which by the way, we're not purporting he will, but maybe let's say in the event that he does, I still think he'll enter this conversation this way. People like you and me telling our grandkids, do not forget or overlook. And people like Ben Taylor making these videos and going, you got to include him in that 4 and 5. I don't think he'll ever really enter the barbershop conversations, the just walking down the street, the sports bar conversations of Jordan versus LeBron. But basketball nerds who watched will definitely have now don't forget this guy the same way we do with Wilt Chamberlain, for example.
Right.
And is it a coincidence that Jokic and Wilt might be lined up next to each other in a lot of record books? So maybe that's he enters this as a Wilt figure of. And another parallel, was there any footage of Wilt? Jokic played in Denver, so no one saw him. So we'll have to convince people this actually happened.
So here's where I think he can leave a legacy on the sport. That's the narrative legacy. Dirk was, in a lot of ways, the first superstar European. You know, we had Drazen, we had Sabonis, we've had all these players, but Dirk was like considered the biggest name. What if he was the predecessor to the wave? And Jokic is considered the guy that ushered in this entirely new wave. Now, it's not directly a credit to him. Luka was already here. Giannis is already coming over here. But if we look at the 2020s as the year Europe took over the NBA's upper echelon, and Jokic was the top of that, he then becomes the face of a new era of the NBA that no longer was owned by the Americans. And to further that home, this is why my prophecy is my favorite of all of this.
I knew you were going there.
Jokic playing for Serbia and winning a gold medal against a fully formed and intent Team USA that features LeBron and this or that. While it's not an NBA thing, I actually think it would add to his GOAT trophy case if he beat a quote-unquote dream team.
It feeds into that part of the narrative, and given that we don't think he'll get the cultural bump, does it take something fascinating? Is there a Jokic documentary where he took down the dream team?
It's not they become tied together. Idea that the 2020s was the world sort of like raising to the same tier as the U.S. collectively versus the U.S. solely, but raising themselves to that level. And the exclamation point on it, or the defining moment of it, wasn't even in the NBA. It was actually he dominated the NBA, but he also won on the international stage.
We're actually agreeing semantically. I'm with you. So I think that's part of it. And by the way, what you described, I think, is going to happen. I think he is going to be. Giannis will get some of this as well, but we'll look at this era as the era that it truly became a global game, in that the best players in the world were not just arguably not Americans. In this case, right now, definitely not. And Jokic will be the face of that, in my opinion.
Do you see that Truth Bearer down there said I'm young?
No, he's talking to the chat. He's now moved on to a Djokovic debate. So.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I wonder how long I'm going to be considered young. Am I still young? I'm 39. Should we go to the ad read?
Yeah, let's go to the ad read.
All right, on the other side, that was narrative case, which is very important for a GOAT because GOAT is hypothetical. But what is the statistical markers that already show him to be, that this is a fair conversation to have?
You know who's the GOAT? Breckenridge Brewery. We love our Breck beers at DNVR, like Broncos Country. Pretty seasonally appropriate. If you want to enjoy Sundays, it might take a little help. $6 at the DNVR bar, new recipe. Breck Brew has a beer for every occasion. There's no better way to watch a game than having some Breck Brew with it. Check out the Breck Beer Locator. Tell it which beer you're looking for. It'll tell you where to go next, down to the 10th of a mile, or just come and meet us on the corner of Colfax and York, where we have delicious Brecks in can, on tap, flowing all football weekend long. And once you're done hanging out at the DNVR bar, go back home to your own sports mecca, the man or woman cave, with a little help from FOCO, the leading manufacturer of sports and entertainment merchandise, with a product line that includes apparel, accessories, toys, collectibles, novelty items, and more. FOCO always has our back for Colorado sports. They have yours too. Get the best gear around by using the link in our description. For all non-presale items, use the promo code DNVR for 10% off.
We back?
Yeah.
We back. All right. Segment 3 here as we dive into Jokic's GOAT potential. Number one, let me give you some stats that are important. Now, these catch-all metrics don't mean everything. We're the first to know this. We're the first to know it. They don't mean everything, but they are interesting. We're going to go through catch-all advanced stats, and we're also going to go through some individual, just regular counting stats. Currently, would you guess who is number one in NBA history? NBA and ABA, but NBA history, number one all-time in playoff PER?
I would think it is either LeBron, Jordan, or Steph.
Right now, it is Nikola Jokic.
Oh!
He is number one. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, this list must be very flawed.
And PER's flawed, right? It's
very
an
flawed.
antiquated catch-all.
Move
on.
Number 2 is Michael Jordan.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Number 3 is George Mikan, which is a very interesting one because this is like such an early, you have to, whatever. Number 4 is LeBron James. So if we look at this and say, of the modern, quote unquote, modern era, the order is Jokic, Jordan, LeBron. Only one of those names would seem like a little bit of an outlier to most people.
Sure.
It's not like this list is terrible. Giannis, Barkley, Duncan, Shaq, Hakeem. These are guys in the top 10. These are all guys that we would agree. There's nobody in there that doesn't belong in that conversation. Jokic is number one. There's at least some. Let me go through a couple more for you here. Just
let's listen to your point. If you start getting names like DeMar DeRozan,
right,
we're throwing that one out. But that largely checks out.
Largely checks out. If we go to career playoff box plus minus, and again, I'm doing playoffs here. I'm doing playoffs. I'm not trying to do regular season, this or that. This is playoffs when it matters. Number 1 is Michael Jordan, box plus minus. Number 2 is Nikola Jokic. Number 3 is LeBron James.
In my experience watching basketball, checks out, Adam.
Kawhi, Giannis, Magic, T-Mac, Steph, Hakeem, Larry Bird, all in the top 10. Once again, all guys that we would understand. I mean, Kawhi Leonard is maybe the most surprising, but remember, he's had some big-time playoff performances. He stepped up. Win shares per 48. Let's go to a different one. PER, box plus minus, win shares. These are all a little bit different. Number 1 is Michael Jordan. Number 2 is George Mikan. Number 3 is LeBron James. Number 4 is Jokic. It turns out that all catch-all metrics have Jokic, LeBron, Jordan, 1, 2, 3. And by the way, this close in terms of which one is which, right? They all are razor thin in which one's first, second, or third. To me, these stats don't mean everything. They don't mean everything. But they don't mean nothing. And it just goes to show that Jokic has had some insane... By
the way, as Jokic truthers, we might want to get on the Mikan is underrated train.
George Mikan?
Excuse me. Also,
it's not. He played where there was no painted area. It's like two different. Man. They had to get it out of the.
I'm just joking that it helps our Jokic argument, but I don't want to step on your toes because we have this pulled up. But you're looking at mostly playoff numbers right now, right?
Only playoff numbers.
Can I throw a regular season one in there?
Please. They come up later, but sure.
Oh, they do come up later. Oh, I'll let you.
We'll just go through the order here. Doing. If we go through triple doubles, so now let's get out of that and just go to counting stats. Triple doubles. Jokic currently has 105. He is 6th. 107 is a tie, or number 4 is a tie at 107 for LeBron and Jason Kidd. So when Jokic gets 2 more, odds are he is going to vault into the top 4 all time in triple doubles. And within striking distance is Magic Johnson at 138. And I think it's realistic to think he could catch Oscar and maybe even Russell Westbrook. It would be tough for both to catch both of those guys, but I think it's safe to say he's very good chance of being top 3 all time in triple doubles by the time he retires.
Yeah, and playoff triple doubles.
Oh yeah,
top 3.
Of course, and not only that, he had 10 this year. He had 10. The first year in his prime with his fully healthy roster, he goes for 10. It was the most ever in a playoff run. And 16 total is behind Magic. Magic has 30. He's got, what did you say, 15, I think, or 14? He's got 16 more to go to pass Magic. This is the one that I think has like a really good chance of him being number one all time in playoff triple doubles.
Yeah, this
not
one I think
stat padding.
No, this one's probably likely too. And yeah, they're not stat padding. And then this is one where the numbers, as juicy as they are, almost don't tell the whole story. If you're watching, these triple doubles are routine. They're routine.
30, 20, 10 games. He's got 3 in the playoffs. He's got 1 in the finals. There's only been 5 ever in the playoffs as a whole. Wilt, Kareem, Jokic 3 times. These are just counting numbers. 30, 20, 10, incredibly hard to do. But let's take out the rebounding because you're punishing, bigs rebound, right? Guards don't always rebound. Let's just say 30 points, 10 assists. That's a guard stat line, by the way. 30 points, 10 assists. He's already has 8 of these overall. He's striking distance to Michael Jordan at 15. LeBron has 22. It's possible Jokic becomes the number 1 playoff 30-10 guy. 10 assists.
Yeah, and as a center. And so then you start going as far as guys who revolutionized the game or played it in a way that's never been played before or pushed our boundaries of understanding a position or the game forward. There's a statistical argument for something that is typically just a take you say into the microphone, but you start to have stats that reflect this has never been done before.
Then you have the points here. His career high being 53 in a playoff game is pretty awesome because there's a lot of players whose playoff high is not that high, has never been that high. But to me, this is the other one. It's just the same way LeBron was thought as like of a passer. Early in his career, it was like, well, he's passer, like a little bit of a lesser passer than Magic, but not quite the scorer of a Jordan. Well, then he became one of the greatest scorers.
Right.
And it was like, no, he's actually just a scorer who's also a great passer. I think with Jokic, he's largely considered right now a great passer and a good scorer. I think it's wrong. He's incredibly efficient. But I do wonder when you see years like this, when he scores 32 a game against Anthony Davis, if he just has a couple more series like that and a couple more individual games, 50-point playoff games, I think people will be like, well, he was a great passer, but, Shaq was a better scorer. And we'll say, well, hold up. Did Shaq ever score 53 in the playoffs?
Right.
Did Shaq ever score 55 times over the course of his career? That's Jordan scored 55 times in the playoffs and Jokic. Then you get to make that argument.
Yep, there's no doubt, man. There's no doubt. And he has this late start to the career thing as a second-round pick, right? It's different than all these other guys who are playing right away. So the regular season numbers will never actually reflect it the way his peak will, right? Even now, you look up the career points per game, it's lower than you'd think based off how he's played the last few years because started off the bench and eventually earned the trust of the organization. So that's why you got to go to playoff scoring for Jokic. And when it's all said and done, the combination of volume and efficiency as a playoff scorer will be something that few people can touch. And that it is the case that he is an elite scorer. It is not the case that people recognize that yet.
Do you know how many times 50 has been scored in a playoff game in NBA history?
How many times is that?
49.
Okay.
He's got one of them. 53 points has only been done 20 times. 20 times has a player scored 53 or more. So he's already up there. I do think 53 is likely going to be his career high in a single playoff game. But at the same time, who knows? Who knows, man?
I think it's smarter to leave everything on the table than take anything off the table.
So for me, I do think there is a narrative thing about him having to, win. You just have to finish it off with the hardware. And I think it's fair. I honestly think when you get to this level, I think it's unfair for when you're trying to gauge players in like the 50th best player of all time range, because circumstance does matter for most players. But once you get into the top 10, it's like, look, man, you're good enough that you could win. LeBron is good enough that he could have won 10, 11, 12 titles. At the end of the day, you have to count what they did win and forget the circumstance. And I think for Jokic, it's going to be the same. So he has to win. But to me, I really think it is as simple as this, Vote. I really think it's as simple as this. What Jokic did in 2023, just what he did between regular season and playoffs, and then how it ended. Got to do that 3, 4, 5 more times. I think 3 more times, you're in the conversation, probably behind. You do it 5 more times,
right?
I think you're in the very short list conversation. And if you do what he just did 6 times, I know people are going to find this absolutely crazy. Jordan did not do this 6 times. Jordan did this, I would say probably 2 times, and then he had something slightly below this, not much, Slightly below this another 4 times. But what Jokic did this year, 30, 20, 10 games, multiple times, 30 points, 10 assists, 10 rebounds through the playoff, through the best defenders. You do this a couple more times, your resume is going to stack up with anybody's in history. He did it once, which is impressive enough.
Right.
Do it 4, 5, 6 times.
I agree with that. I think he's going to enter the bubble of the conversation, to be honest. I can see him doing this 2 or 3 more times.
Yeah.
I can see him doing it more than that. I'm just not going to pencil that in because what are we talking about here? Him being the greatest basketball player of all time? Yeah, a lot has to break right. But I do think there's at least 2 more years of, without inarguably the best player during the regular season and the playoffs, utter dominance. LeBron has this peak, that the longevity thing that we will maybe never see again from anyone.
Yeah.
At his very, very, very best, Jokic played the game of basketball as well, if not better, than anyone I've ever seen. Right. I miss the Jordan part, so I'm taking myself out of it and all the greats that came before.
There's almost a ceiling, though, to what is possible. You know what I mean? And,
right.
and Jokic's knocking on that ceiling at his best.
But I watched LeBron with the same reverence, with the same hope about what I'd get out of the experience, thinking I'd never seen an athlete like that. It's not quite the same because at his peak defensively, he was a different animal. But I'll say this, offensive peak, what I've seen Jokic through the last 3 years, he's made the game of basketball look easier than I've ever seen. So
there you go.
Oh, by the way, let's just do career box plus minus. We keep doing well. You just got to go to the playoffs where he really dominates. Yeah. Do you think Magic Johnson's one of the best players of all time?
Yes.
Do you think LeBron James is one of the best players of all time?
No question.
How about Michael Jordan?
I do think he is.
Okay, that's 4, 3, and 2 in career box plus minus leaders.
Man,
who's number 1?
Who is number 1?
It's Nikola Jokic. So, look, all I'm saying is so far, eye test, it kind of checks out. I know he has a lot to do, but let's not pretend he's behind schedule. At this age, Jokic has set himself up to at least be in this conversation.
Love it. I honestly think it's possible too. Of course, unlikely. The odds are always against it, but I'm just saying what he did this year was the top S tier. Like if you did tiers of playoff runs, Jokic's 2023 goes in the S tier, along with several other players, some of whom did it multiple times. He gets 1 in the S tier category, and that alone is super, super rare.
At first, it was, can he be an all-star? Then can he be an MVP? Then can he be top 20? At what point is there a limit? And why do we have to stop wondering?
Yeah.
Maybe sky is the limit.
I love it. I love it. They just gave us top 15. They just gave us best player in the league.
We want more.
We just grab more territory.
We're always a couple years ahead.
What can I say?
We might be wrong on this one, but it's worth trying. It's worth trying.
We might not.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to break. On the other side, I want one last thing about the GOAT thing, and then we're going to talk about Poole and Porter, the difference between Warriors culture and Nuggets culture, perhaps?
When it's all said and done, that Jokic resume, man, you're not going to be able to look at it, not without at least a pair of shady rays protection your eyes, because it's just too beautiful. You too can look beautiful, feel beautiful with Shady Rays. You don't have to spend $1 million to feel like you look like $1 million, and you can shop at Shady Rays with no risk, because if you don't like them or you break them, you can exchange for free within 30 days. Do what over 250,000 people have done. Go to Shady Rays and check out some of their sunglasses, but do what we want you to do. Go to shadyrays.com and use code DNVR, because then you get 2+ pairs of sunglasses at 50% off. Not 15, 50. Half off 2+ pairs of sunglasses. Try them for yourself. The shade's rated over 5 stars. 5 stars by over 250,000 people. DraftKings is a great place to hang out on any football weekend. And as we know, the football weekends start well before the weekend. These days, you got Thursday night football. You've got some great college football. You've got some awesome NFL action. Get some skin in the game with DraftKings Sportsbook. And right now, new customers can bet $5, get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Football's more fun when you're in on the action. Download the app now. Sign up with code DNVR. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook, which is an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Use code DNVR and the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, licensed partner Golden Nugget Lake Charles, 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction, void in Ontario. See sportsbook.draftkings.com/football terms for eligibility, terms, and responsible gaming resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply.
And we are back. All right. Final segment here on the Thursday edition of the DNVR Nuggets podcast. Real quick to tie a bow on the GOAT thing. I just want to say, I don't think Jokic is the only player currently playing who has GOAT potential.
Sure.
LeBron James obviously does, and he's still playing. LeBron has 4 championships. Him still playing, it is possible he wins another one, and his GOAT case goes even more. Every year he keeps playing and playing at a top 5, 6, 7 player level. You have to sit there and go, okay, if they won a title next year, we thought the Warriors were done, and then they win another one, and you're like, okay, now they,
right.
it changes things. LeBron, even though I would bet against it at this age, and I do think that he has been surpassed by players like Jokic, you somehow manage a way to have just that magical playoff run, which, by the way, they were having until they ran into Jokic.
Yeah.
But if you have that playoff run and he gets another 1 or 2, his GOAT case goes up even more.
And he has the totals case, which he continues to add on the assist scoring numbers. I
do think people care about that less than peak. They factor it in, but like Kareem played for forever too, and people, but whatever.
Yeah.
I think Luka Doncic maybe has the next best case for GOAT, in large part because he's so young and so skilled. He's got his whole career ahead of him. He does things people haven't done.
I also just think he's good enough that you start to ask yourself that question, right? Versus juxtaposition with a guy like Giannis,
right?
Who I think his resume might actually be better than Luka's because of just the early accolades. But did anyone watching this era, as great as we think Giannis is, do we really think he's the best basketball player of all time? I honestly think that question will just have a no to it, whether that's fair or not. Luka, I think, has this dynamic, well-rounded game that maybe allows him to slide into that conversation.
That being said, Giannis is next on my list. He has a chance to be this. I mean, he has 1 title. He has 2 MVPs. Yep. It's entirely possible he owns the 2020s and wins 3, 4, 5 in a row coming up. And then you look at that. I do think that, again, Giannis is going to do this thing where I think he ends up leaving and going to a big market and we're all going to be annoyed. But you know what? It's just part of the game, and you get accolades for him. Steph Curry, I put him on here. He has a chance. He has 4 titles. We think the Warriors are done. What if Steph wins 2, 3, 4 more? At a certain point, you do have to look at it and go, I mean, he's got, right now he has 4 titles. It's insane. He's way up there. But
Steph is kin to Jokic in this conversation in that
his
argument is going to start with, at a certain point.
Yeah, at a certain point, exactly
at a certain point, when we add it all up.
Yeah, I'm just saying, it's not crazy to think Steph could have 6 or 7 titles. I'm betting he ends up with 4. I think they're done.
And watching the whole time, I think LeBron James was a better basketball player. I am prepared 10 to 15 years from now to have people tell me Steph was better. I don't think it'll be true, but I'm prepared for that.
Now, guys that I think are very, very unlikely, but I have to mention them anyway. We're going to start with Jason Tatum.
Next.
Look, Tatum has a lot of work to do, but he is very young. He's only 21, so
that's a good point.
He's only
as
21.
A literal teenager,
or 19. I'm sorry, he's only 19.
Yeah, he's only 19.
He just is young and talented. I don't think he's going to get there. I think he's clearly
he's a great player.
He's a great player.
He's a great player. But he's not.
Anthony Edwards, same thing. Jordan, LeBron, these guys were doing better things at the same young age. Nonetheless, he might be on his own path and reach a higher peak or something. But
he's also maybe one of their children.
Kevin Durant is an interesting one.
He's not the best player of all time.
I just feel so strongly and definitively about this, but you know what? He might just keep finding new Golden State 2017 Warriors to join and just winds up with 7 titles, and everyone just, for whatever reason, defaults him as the team's best player and wins. We're sour about Kevin Durant. We can't speak honestly. Kawhi Leonard, probably not. He'd have to actually play games, but you never know. He has 2 elite playoff runs under his belt, championship runs, and then it's hard to factor the rest of his career. Wembanyama, I mean, he's just so young. We have to put him in there. He's entry. Maybe he's not even close to this, probably.
I actually don't know if we do have to put him in there.
We don't have to.
Honestly, we don't. He hasn't played a game.
I'm going to throw Shea out there just in the off chance that he's actually the real Luka, and we look back at this 7 years from now and are like, how did we not even mention him? So I'm just going to mention it so that I have it on record.
Sure.
I don't think it's a chance.
Insane early stats, production, all that.
Yeah. I don't think there's anybody else currently that I think has a GOAT chance.
No,
not even a puncher.
I think it's Steph, Luka, Giannis, Jokic, and then LeBron, who's already in that conversation before he retired.
I actually think it's just those guys. And then Wembanyama has this thing we don't know anything about.
The Giannis thing is interesting because as much as I said everything I did earlier about feeling like there's maybe almost a reckoning coming, it's also easy to write Giannis off, and he did hurt his back last year, and he's extremely good, and he did have a 50-piece in the finals, and that he gets better and continues to produce is not off the table.
Yeah. You wanted to talk about Jordan Poole and Michael Porter Jr.
Man, I'm just fascinated. I don't know if you guys saw a clip. JJ Redick and Andre Iguodala were talking in an Old Man on the Three podcast about Jordan Poole, and we talked about the Warriors maybe as jazz if those Spurs teams were more sheet music, and Redick was talking about the way those three guys, Clay, Draymond, and Steph, are not only empowered to be like jazz, they're encouraged to. It's how you get the Warriors at their best. Well, at the same time, you know, there's always been a kernel of truth of could the Warriors be even better if they cleaned it up, right? And so at what point are you losing your identity? And Draymond's a great microcosm of that conversation as well. Does he have to foul as much? He claims he's got to be a certain way to be who he is. So that stuff is really interesting to me. Enter Jordan Poole, who comes kind of post the real dynasty part of it, but with a chance to win a title. And he is enabled to, or he wants to initially play with a freedom like those three guys. He gets some of it. He delivers at a high level, and he helps them win a title. But there's always this second part of it of like, okay, he wants to play the way Clay, Steph, and Dre do, but how do he really earn that? Does that make the Warriors who they are at their best? Then you think about Michael Porter Jr. with Denver. Similar in maybe a talent to usage slot kind of role. And Denver, as opposed to all this freedom, they really just went with discipline, right? They really tried to mold Porter into a high floor player. Both of these approaches yielded a title. And so I'm not sure if I know if one was right or wrong. But it had me thinking about what this upcoming year looks like for Porter, because we wonder if they should give him more freedom. But in doing that, do you break the seal of whatever this balance is that allowed Denver to win a title? And then also, is there a timeline in your team building and trying to build a dynasty and winning multiple titles where you can't hang on to the balance anymore? You're not that perfect team, and your best shot is to embrace the chaos and to let a Poole or a Porter kind of run wild. I don't really have a conclusion here, Adam.
Yeah, no, it's just a question.
I'm just fascinated. The Warriors, I think, probably did the right thing with Jordan Poole, yet here they are in this situation. I'm just curious about how Denver handles Porter.
The way I would view this is that I think Steph and Draymond are a perfect yin and yang from just like an energy standpoint. Like, have you ever seen those like audio spectrographs or whatever, like where like a certain tone will make a certain shape? I don't know if someone can help me here. Sometimes you can put like competing dissonant tones and the waves don't line up, and then it makes like a chaos. It looks like chaos. I kind of believe this is true of personalities, where Draymond and Steph are almost perfectly inverted in a way that creates harmony, and it makes this really great balance. Steph seems like the greatest star player to play alongside, and Draymond seems like kind of a crazy drag sometimes, and together they just make this perfect yin and yang. I think Klay Thompson is the perfect guy to put around them because he is just a vibes magnet. Like, he just like absorbs the vibes and fits in perfectly. And I think Jordan Poole might be the opposite of that, where it's like, no, he goes into the waveform and breaks it and spatters it into chaos. Now, that's not a critique of any of the principal pieces involved. It's just to say that, to me, that's why the Warriors are so fascinating, is it's this perfect environment, near perfect environment that isn't perfect for everyone. And that, to me, is more the question here of with the Michael Porter is clearly he has good enough to make this work, and talent and all of those things to make up for it. This year, I do kind of wonder, like, is there a ideal Michael Porter role that is harmonious with the frequency of the Murray-Jokic dynamic?
Yeah, and does getting there entail allowing him to make some mistakes along the way, but trusting that maybe his center that he comes back to here is maybe just in a more disciplined or committed way to the team, than Poole was. But Poole's thing was interesting because he helped them win that finals game. Yeah. And then you come back, and then guys are asking you to scale it back a little bit. So there's a little bit of, once you let it out of the bag, can you contain it? And I also just thought it was so interesting because Iguodala just described it as both Poole a hindrance to the Warriors, but also the Warriors a hindrance to Poole. And so is there a point where Porter perceives that, this is a hindrance to his growth now? I'm just perpetually fascinated by how much more Porter upsets the balance versus makes this team better in the long run. And we don't have an answer yet, but it'll be one of my biggest storylines this season.
I will say the vibiest outcome for the Nuggets is that he does become that perfectly harmonious Klay Thompson.
That's it.
The guy that just like somehow elevates it to a whole other level. And then we really can talk dynasty. We can talk GOATs. We can talk all of these things because they all become significantly more possible. That does it for today's show, guys. We're out of here tomorrow. Not sure what time we're going to be tomorrow because we're going to be playing golf. Our golf tournament. By the way, you guys got to sign up for these things, man. These golf tournaments are so fun. It's one of the last like truly outdoor things I'm going to do before the winter months come in and you know, do their thing. So we're going to be having fun with that, but we will be live at some point. I just don't know when. Check your YouTube feeds. Hit the notify button whenever the show gets up. We'll see you guys later.